Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Switch. My name is Patty Hampton, and I am excited about this week's topic. Did you know that nonprofit HR has served thousands of mission-driven organizations over the past 20 years? This episode is all about how organizations can create a strong virtual recruitment and onboarding program. Listen in as Heather De La Riva, Managing Director of Nonprofit HR's Outsourcing Practice, and Danisha Martin, Executive Search Consultant, provide insights on how to ensure success in a virtual recruiting environment and leveraging best practices in virtual onboarding. Share this production in your communities and download the slides and transcripts. Visit nonprofithr.com/the switch for a video recording, presentation, and other assets. Without further ado, here's Heather and Danisha.
Danisha and I are excited to be here with you today. The COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing has brought about many changes to the ways in which we're conducting our work. With many organizations shifting to virtual operations for the first time and into the foreseeable future, we're excited to share best practices that we've learned as talent professionals, as a team here at Nonprofit HR that works virtually, and through our engagements with our clients. Today's focus is going to cover ensuring success in a virtual recruiting environment, tips for effective video interviewing, leveraging best practices for virtual onboarding, and a question and answer session. I'm excited to turn it over to my talented colleague, Danisha Martin, to talk with you about important considerations for a virtual recruiting process.
Thank you, Heather. Well, obviously, we continue to hear what an unprecedented time that we're in. And while that is true, we must also focus on how to move forward in our organizations despite all the challenges. Over the next few minutes, we'll delve into the strategy of what it takes to successfully virtualize your recruiting environment. While you may be a novice or a guru at the virtual recruiting process, my hope is that this overview will assist you in preparing to and consistently attracting and selecting a high-quality candidate despite our current circumstances.
This event was originally recorded as a Nonprofit HR webinar. Check out other Nonprofit HR events and virtual learning opportunities at nonprofithr.com/events.
Let's first review what the typical recruiting process entails. The 6 key elements of the recruiting process are to plan and prepare, source and advertise, review candidates, assess and interview, candidate selection and offer, and then onboard for success. We will consider ways to align the recruiting process to the current demands of a virtual environment. The good news is many of you are already operating in this way, or there are some aspects of the process in which you currently work within a virtual framework. So let's break down each step in the process. Step 1 is to plan and prepare. It's critical to think through these important questions before you post a job or reach out to one candidate. Organization is key in any recruiting process, but especially now when there are many moving parts and you can't walk down the hall to have a quick huddle with your talent acquisition team. So you'll want to think about, who do you want to attract for this position? Where can this talent be found? When do you need to fill the position? And how will you assess an interview? The following tasks will allow you to address these questions. Build a timeline to map out your deadlines for each of the 6 steps in the process, highlighting key milestones like when you want to have the phone screens completed, availability for video interviews, and your target date to select your candidate and the target start date for your new hire. Create engaging job descriptions and plan job ad campaigns. More on this during the sourcing and advertising piece. You'll also want to develop a qualification matrix, prepare assessment tools, and identify tracking tools. We'll talk more about this during the reviewing phase of the process. Select an interview panel. Who are your key stakeholders? You'll want to make sure that you include the team in all of your planning, because the more everyone understands how they fit into the process, the better the execution. Planning an effective job ad campaign includes a number of different things. An ad campaign, first of all, is your detailed plan, including where you will post your positions, how often you will post, and it includes how you'll implement your available budget, if you have one, for posting sites that are not for free. Think about the ideal candidate and think about your diversity, equity, and inclusion needs and where diverse candidates hang out. For instance, the National Association of Black Accountants and the Association of Latino Professionals for America and other similar associations all have job boards where you can post your open positions. A well-written and engaging job description is so critical. You want to shift from a list of duties and responsibilities to your elongated elevator pitch. Remember, your job description should be a dynamic and attractive marketing piece that really paints a picture that entices highly qualified candidates to click apply. Remember to avoid language that excludes diverse candidates and use inclusive language. You'll also want to refresh your postings frequently. Remember the adage, out with the old, in with the new? Well, when you refresh your postings on job boards, you position your role right at the top. And consistency is key. Post, analyze the results of your applicant flow, tweak, and repost. In other words, wash, rinse, repeat. Passive recruiting is when you post, candidates apply, and then you review your applicants. But active recruiting is when you source or seek out the ideal candidates for the role, and usually they already have jobs. So the question is, when you are actively reaching out to candidates, how many of you prefer to call candidates on the phone in the first outreach versus how many of you prefer to email candidates in the first outreach? And then finally, some of you may prefer to text message or message in someone's private or direct mail through their social media, whether that be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or any of the rest of them. And while there's no necessarily right or wrong answer, I want to give you a couple of quick tips and best practices for most effective sourcing. So remember, the phone is your friend. I would suggest that we flip this around and go first the phone, then the email, then the social media and the texting. And here's why. Everyone is or should be at home or sheltering in place, unless they are our heroic essential workers. So leverage that. Emails get lost in space, otherwise known as spam. And if you get the voicemail, you can always leave a message. Of course, you'll want to be brief, but the goal is to get your candidates to call you back for more information. If you do reach the candidate, then you can do a short phone screen to confirm their interest and schedule a phone interview. But remember, the phone is your friend, and it's the best way to make a real connection with a highly qualified candidate. Use email as your backup. The backup is to the voicemail that you left, or it's to confirm the appointment that you made when you caught them on the phone. And then that way you can confirm the phone interview as far as the date, the time, and how you will contact them. Lastly, leverage social media as a way to really engage your candidate, because on this platform, you can incorporate unique experiences or skills that they've highlighted in their profile, and that, of course, is very engaging to candidates. However, remember, your best job ad is actually your current employees. Above all, this is probably the most underutilized resource for sourcing and advertising, and you can incentivize employee referrals through an employee referral program. You can ask your employees to post a mention of your job on their social media and email it directly to their network of friends and family. Remember, birds of a feather flock together. So if you love your current employees and want more folks like them, engage them in an employee referral process. But always remember to have them include a call to action, such as, please send your resumes to xyz@email.com. And remember, your employees can also promote your brand. I'll give you a quick example. Last week, Nonprofit HR was so kind to send every employee a snack box. And let me tell you, it was fancy. Then we were invited to take a selfie with the box. I happened to post my selfie on LinkedIn. Even without a call to action, my inbox was peppered with inquiries about our firm. Why is this? It's because people are drawn to a healthy culture. So let's move on to step 3, which is review candidates. Be consistent in how you screen candidates. It's so important not to relax your compliance standards, so be consistent in how you screen and do that across the board. An effective solution for this is a hiring matrix. This is a tool that helps you to quickly and easily screen for qualified candidates. The minimum qualifications are plugged into the matrix, and you can quickly review resumes and applications to ensure they qualify, and then move them to the next phase of your process. Beware of bias when you're reviewing candidates on sites like LinkedIn and other social sites. Don't let the photos and information about a candidate's affiliations preclude you from giving those candidates a fair shake at the role. When you're working with a selection team, consider using tools that allow you to share your progress in real time. Sites like Google Sheets, Smartsheets, and Dropbox can definitely help you to do this. Again, keeping everyone on the same page at the same time is critical when you're working in a virtual environment. So it's time for step 4, assessing and interviewing our candidates. Now, before COVID-19, many of you were already employing video interviewing, but if you weren't, your interview plan may have included a phone screen, an initial in-person interview, followed by a second round panel interview, also in person. Now, it will likely look something like this: a phone screen, a first video interview, and a second video interview. My suggestion is that you consider moving the panel interview to the first interview. There's a few reasons for this. It will help you leverage time and resources, and it will also allow you to divvy up the roles. For example, having a note taker. Finally, with a video interview, it's always helpful to have more than one set of eyes and ears so your team can collaboratively give feedback on each candidate. The second video interview can be used for finalists, where you can dig deeper into a behavioral style interview and learn more about your candidate in a more interactive conversation. But whatever you decide, stick to your interview plan. And don't worry, we'll dig deeper into interviewing on a virtual platform in just a moment for those of you who are new to it. Lastly, consider alternative methods of assessing talent to round out your vetting process. For example, requiring a cover letter or a writing sample is very helpful. Also, behavioral or skills assessments can be helpful to continue to vet your candidates in the absence of in-person interviews. Nonprofit HR uses something called the PDA for high-level candidates, which is the personal development analysis and is an assessment instrument scientifically validated by the American Institute of Business Psychology. It's designed to objectively assess the behavioral factors that influence the performance of individuals in their work environment. So now that you've developed an active pipeline of qualified and engaged candidates, you must keep these candidates engaged. Remember to always close candidates on the next touch point and confirm the next appointment before you end your interaction, whether it's a phone screen or a video call. After the interview, over-communicate, even if your update is simply that there's more info coming soon. You've heard people say, out of sight, out of mind. Will stay on your candidate's mind.
You have been listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast on powering your people with talent management insights, best practices, and hacks. Looking for a thought partner to help you integrate talent into your mission's strategic plan? Well, the good news is nonprofit HR has solutions to meet your unique talent management needs. Strategic planning is an annual ritual for many nonprofits, yet countless organizations plan for programs and fundraising without thinking about the talent needed to meet those goals and ultimately their mission. With more than 20 years of expertise under our belt and the bench strength of credentialed consultants, we partner with all mission types and offer solutions that span project-based human resources consulting and outsourcing, search, total rewards, and DEI. Join the community of social impact organizations that have trusted nonprofit HR to help them achieve their full potential through their people.
Step 5 is the exciting part. Candidate selection and offer. This phase reveals whether or not your process was successful. So consider your offer process. Normally, it likely includes a phone call for a verbal offer, followed by a written offer through email. But decide if a video call is more appropriate during your offer process. This could be an opportunity to engage, read body language, initiate necessary negotiations to close the deal. Once you've composed your written offer, include an outline of the post-offer process. Confirming this in writing will clarify a multi-step process and alleviate your candidate's anxiety. Remember, these are uncertain times and everyone is on edge to one extent or another. In fact, I recently placed a finance leader for one of our notable clients, and walking him through the post-offer process was very, I won't say difficult, but it was challenging because, as he should, he had a heightened level of anxiety and was a bit on edge, especially because this candidate was considering another offer that he had on the table. So imagine being in that person's position when you've not had a chance to meet in person, but you now have to make a decision about what employer you'll choose. So remember, it's better to over-communicate to ensure that your candidate shows up for onboarding by building a strong rapport. You can use multiple modes of communicating via email, text, phone, and that all provides an approach that engages the total person. Just think of your friends and family. You don't only connect with your friends through one mode of communication. The organizations that adapt quickly to a more human-centered approach and are less robotic will do very well. So I promised you earlier a quick crash course in effective video interviewing. With a few tips and best practices, you'll be a Zoom pro in no time. You'll want to make sure that you always do a technology check. This means your audio, your visual, and your internet connection. Also, remember to design your video interview room well. Create an appealing and professional video interview room. Consider what the candidate will see. If you have a very high quality camera and a virtual background looks good, then utilize it. But if it's grainy and kind of makes you look like one of those 80s music videos, I would not suggest it. Consider decluttering your space and preparing your lighting and positioning your device in such a way that you can look straight ahead at your video camera versus looking down or looking up. You would be surprised what an impactful change this makes to the viewer. And of course, clear all distractions, silence alarms, cell phones, children, especially your furry children, and any other quarantine coworkers that you may be sharing space with. Be sure to do a warm introduction of yourself and your colleagues and share an impactful statement about your company and the position. Remember, this is a chance for you to make an impactful impression on your highly qualified candidate. So take the time to outline the agenda for the interview, which can be done ahead of time in your confirmation email. But even on the video call, you'll want to give a quick frame of reference for what they can expect over the next several minutes of the interview. Maintain eye contact. You might be wondering, how exactly do you do that on a video? Well, you look directly into the camera. This is called virtual eye contact. And while it may seem strange because we're all tempted to keep our eyes on our own faces, when you look directly into the camera, again, you're creating a warm and engaging environment for your candidate. Practice active listening. This means repeating your candidate's questions back to them before you answer. It means summarizing what you've heard their answer to be. And it also means that you engage your candidate in conversation versus a simple question and answer interrogative approach. A few more tips to engage your candidate well over a video interview. Take your time. It can be so tempting to rush, but consider connection speeds and audio dropping out and all of the rest of the things that can happen with technology. And consider that your candidate may also be acclimating to the video platform and might be a little extra nervous. Capture thorough notes. It's so helpful to designate someone to do this for the group, and/or you can record the video, but make sure you get your candidate's permission first. And finally, but not least, smile. You're not on candid camera, but you are on camera. That was for the Gen Xers out there who will get that very corny joke. The point is to be mindful to bring your whole self to the video interview and resist, again, the temptation to be distracted by the technology, devices, etc. In other words, you don't want to miss the chance to truly connect with your candidate. For a more detailed tutorial, LinkedIn Learning offers a great training entitled Executive Presence on Video Conference Calls, and I highly recommend it. This brings us to the conclusion of the virtualized recruitment experience. Shall we check for a few questions before moving on to the onboarding experience?
Thanks, Danisha. We actually do have a number of questions. So let me give you a few and then we'll save the rest for the end. So let's see, somebody asked about if you have an applicant that does not have access to video conferencing, what would you suggest?
Wow, that is a really good question, Alicia. You know, a number of things come to mind. And to be quite honest, I hadn't thought through that because we were making the assumption that, your applicants would be able to access it. One thing that you could suggest, and this is not ideal, but if your applicant can borrow someone's smartphone, Zoom still works on the smartphone. Obviously, a lot of candidates will not have access to computers or laptops in their home, but most everyone owns a cell phone, and most of those cell phones are smartphones. You can get a decent picture through FaceTime, through Skype, and through the Zoom platform through your smartphone. So that would be my suggestion there.
Okay, thank you. And somebody else asked a question about when you're at the offer stage, if you were scheduling a virtual meeting with a candidate that you're going to offer the position to, how do you manage scheduling that without causing too much anxiety for the candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. Again, this is something to think through. Every candidate may not be, or rather every position, I should say, it may not be appropriate, but particularly for your higher level roles is where I was coming from. And the reason is that your high level positions, the candidates for those roles will have questions. They will likely be poised to move through and offer conversation over a video, and those higher level candidates would likely be very receptive to that level of engagement. However, for some of your other roles that are staff level or even some of the entry manager levels, it just may not be appropriate. It may be appropriate to simply do the phone on the verbal and follow up with the written over email. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, and then 2 clarifying questions. Could you repeat what PDA stood for again?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm happy to say that for all of our clients at Nonprofit HR, for the higher level manager positions and above, the PDA is actually included with their, when they retain us to handle this. But this is called a personal development analysis. It was designed by the American Institute of Business Psychology.
Okay, and then also could you repeat the name of the LinkedIn Learning opportunity you mentioned?
Oh, certainly. And actually, if you happen to have a screen up with LinkedIn on it, there is a tab. I'm just going to see if I can direct people to it. If you're signed into your LinkedIn account, in the upper right corner is how I see it on my account. And on the far right, there is a tab that says, it looks like a grid of white squares. And if you click it, there's a number of LinkedIn products, including learning, insights, posting a job, etc. If you click on learning, and granted, this may or may not be accessible to everyone depending on your LinkedIn package, but if you do have access to the LinkedIn learning, once you click it there, you can simply type it in. If you type in executive presence for video conferencing, you should have access to the presentation. You'll know that you have gotten it when you see a woman with a blue blazer, and her name is Jessica Chen. You can also probably search by the name Jessica Chen. And again, it's called Executive Presence on Video Conference Calls.
Okay, great. Thanks, Danisha. We have more questions, but we'll hold them to the end and go ahead and let Heather continue on with her section.
Sounds great. So congratulations, you've successfully virtualized your recruiting process. Your candidate has accepted the offer. Glory, hallelujah. Now what do? How do you successfully onboard your new hire? Heather?
Great. Thanks so much, Danisha. And thanks for those great tips, not only on virtual interviewing, but on virtualizing your recruiting process. So as Danisha said, you've done a lot of work through this recruiting process, and you'll want to ensure a strong experience as your employee begins. Some of you have been doing this for a long time, and to others, structured onboarding, whether virtual or not, is an entirely new process. If you haven't done it before, you're not going to do it well overnight, and that's okay. Admitting that it's a work in progress and seeking feedback, being honest and humble as you go along and learn with your new employee will go a long way. If you already have an onboarding program, how do you change the timeline of that program and ensuring that you hit the right pacing and cadence for your different meetings? What's truly important in the onboarding process, and what does it fit within the puzzle? What do you need to share immediately versus what can you share later? And definitely providing a balance between providing information versus overwhelming an employee will be important as you design a rhythm for your program. How do you ensure that culture comes through and it's informative, but that it's still fun? And how do you work to engage your entire team? How do you get your employees the resources that they need? We're going to take time to hit on all of these things as we talk about leveraging best practices with virtual onboarding.
You're listening to The Switch. Follow along with this podcast. Download the slides and other visual materials at nonprofithr.com/The Switch.
So let's begin and talk about why onboarding matters by looking at some recent surveys for a few key metrics. There are some common themes here. Organizations with strong onboarding programs consistently have better retention and engagement metrics. The first one you see here is from Glassdoor. Organizations with a strong onboarding process improve new hire retention by 82% and productivity by over 70%. Integration of your new hires from the beginning is so key. Understanding how their role ties into the larger organization will increase immediate impact. In a recent SHRM poll, 69% of employees are more likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experience a great onboarding process. This important piece of the HR lifecycle will have a lasting impact on your employees and the retention of high performers. And finally, in an Urban Bound survey, 77% of employees who had a formal onboarding process hit their first performance goals. We'll talk today about how to make outcomes and goals part of your onboarding process to give immediate direction to your new employees, particularly during this time of uncertainty. What makes for a great onboarding experience? It's a question that lots of organizations ask, and there's 3 key tenets that I believe very much remain the same from both in-person as well as virtual onboarding. It's how you're going to go about the execution and thinking of creative ways to deepen and broaden the virtual experience that might change. We're going to start here for an overview and then dive deeper within each of these important and interconnected areas. Let's first talk about relational. It's all about your people. How are you going to welcome new employees and provide guidance for them to build relationships? How will this look different in a virtual world? Building relationships not just with their team and department, but with other key stakeholders across the entire organization. Your virtual buddy. Virtual buddies are so important, and having buddy programs is definitely something to think about as well. You're going to want to ensure culture and strategy, ensuring that new hires understand and can feel the culture, demonstrating that from day one and how important it is. Providing guidance and communication around those strategic plans, mission and vision and values, what ties everyone together. And then administrative and operationally, the last key component of any onboarding process. How do you get them the resources that they need in a virtual environment? What do they still need and what's different? Getting a handle on this from your current staff can be helpful too on how they've successfully transitioned into a virtual environment and how you might be able to do that for your new staff members as well. And then finally, ensuring that technology needs are met and there in an overview on outcomes and priorities that will help them to come on board and understand what those goals are during a time of uncertainty. So let's begin with building those virtual relationships. It really needs to be a team effort. You've just finished this wonderful recruiting process that Danisha talked about, and you'll want to continue as you welcome your new hire. Onboarding starts well before the first day. Reaching out ahead of time to keep candidates warm between when you extend and have an accepted offer to when they actually start is going to be key, especially in a virtual environment and during a time of uncertainty. Having your top leadership team and your executive director and CEO reach out to welcome new hires will be a great way to begin for them to see how your organization works. Your manager is the key person in this entire process and the person who's going to be building a very strong relationship and the key person in that of bringing them into the organization. Who interviewed your new hires and who will they be working most closely with? Who are those people and can they be reaching out to welcome and asking if they have any questions prior to starting and how you can alleviate any fears or concerns that they have? Having a team approach can be huge here. You're going to want to make sure that you take the time to take important information sessions, but also getting to keep it light and fun during the process, just like you would when you're bringing employees on in an office. Can you have some virtual lunches or happy hours? How do you get to know your people beyond just the work that they're doing? Who are they and what do they like? We've had the opportunity at Nonprofit HR to talk to some of our clients, and they're doing a lot of really fun things, bringing in a comedian for a happy hour. Or one client actually had an employee who moonlights as a DJ, and he had the opportunity to bring some music to their virtual happy hour. We mentioned before, and I'll say it again, a buddy program is so essential. This is someone who's outside the employee's team or immediate circle. It's someone who's going to be a touch point outside of the immediate work they're doing, where they can ask questions or alleviate concerns. We've had a buddy program in Nonprofit HR for years for our internal hires, and it's been a great way to really integrate people to the team immediately and feel cross-connectivity within different areas. Also ensuring meetings across the entire organization. How are you getting everyone involved and making sure that you're putting together the right timing for how that's happening? You've brought on this new team member and you want to celebrate them. It's a big deal to start your first day, whether it be school or a new job, whatever it is. And even though it's not in person, it's still their first day. So how do you find a creative way to celebrate that? We've had a couple of clients who really started with a 10-minute welcome meeting. And we do that a lot on video. It looks like it might even be a Brady Bunch type of Zoom. But how do you get everyone in there so that they can see people and everyone can say hello and welcome? If they'd been in an office, most new employees would have had the opportunity to meet them in person. And you want to work to kind of mimic that and find ways to do it. Can you send something like flowers, a plant, a fruit basket, something to say, welcome, we're so excited to have you? Are they a tea or a coffee person? Could you send a packet that welcomes them with those things? While you won't be having tea or coffee in the break room, you can have that internally. And as Danisha mentioned, Nonprofit HR sent us these amazing snack packs last week that really brightened spirits in everyone's week. This would be a great way too to start new employees off to have something small. However, it is a challenging time and maybe there isn't additional money in the budget. So what can you do that's creative that isn't going to break the bank? Could you do a digitally recorded welcome message where different employees create a selfie and then send it along to the new hire? Looking at digital cards or welcome emails. Or maybe everyone could share pictures of the first day, just like you do at school. But how do you find creative ways that maybe don't cost money if that's something that's of concern? I think we've talked about it over and over again, but technology is going to be so key in any type of virtual recruitment or onboarding experience. Here at Nonprofit HR, we utilize the platform Zoom, and it's worked really well for us. But there's a lot of others that are out there as well, such as Skype, BlueJeans, or other platforms that allow you to see people as you're talking and to be able to build relationships while making that virtual eye contact is going to be key to building the relationships quickly, but also sustaining them. Do you have any type of chat programs that could work for you, like Slack, Microsoft Teams, or others that might be more comfortable or ones you already have set up? A lot of our clients also utilize Google Meet, which they found to be helpful too. And finding other ways to communicate will be important as well. Email and text, having varied forms that are formal as well as informal, just like you would when you're in person, will be key to mimic. And finally, to build those strong virtual relationships, having intentional and increased communication is going to be important. Now's the time to have those meaningful conversations right from the get-go with supervisors and employees, asking directly, what do you need to feel successful? How can I best support you as you come on? What do you need from me as a manager to be able to do your work well? And coming back to those questions at the 2-week, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day mark, because what they feel initially, or they might not know what they don't know yet, it's going to be important to continuously reevaluate that. Really getting to know your people. How are you doing during this time of uncertainty? Tell me about yourself and what I should know about you. What makes you you? What do you enjoy doing? Finding ways to connect and building those connections when you don't have a water cooler or lunchroom is going to be important too. You're also going to need to find the right number of meetings and check-ins. And initially, the number should probably be higher. We've seen a lot of articles recently that point to the fact that managers should be checking in with employees in those first couple of weeks daily. You can find ways to vary those meetings. Some should be regularly scheduled check-ins. Others might be a quick text to let them know that you have time to connect, or maybe a quick email, or a quick Zoom chat, or whatever platform you're using. But ensuring that they know that you're there when you need them is going to be important. Asking how they like to communicate so that you can customize your style to what their needs are will also be key as well. Moving on to the next key tenet, you're going to want to continue to tie strategy and culture to your onboarding experience.
You have been listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast on powering your people with talent management insights, best practices, and hacks. Looking for a thought partner to help you integrate talent into your mission strategic plan? Well, the good news is Nonprofit HR has solutions to meet your unique talent management needs. Strategic planning is an annual ritual for many nonprofits, yet countless organizations plan for programs and fundraising without thinking about the talent needed to meet those goals and ultimately their mission. With more than 20 years of expertise under our belt and the bench strength of credentialed consultants, we partner with all mission types and offer solutions that span project-based human resources, consulting, and outsourcing, search, total rewards, and DEI. Join the community of social impact organizations that have trusted nonprofit HR to help them achieve their full potential through their people.
So reviewing your strategy documents should definitely be a priority session at the beginning of your onboarding process, probably within the first day, that's led by someone, if not your CEO or executive director, on your leadership team. What is the strategic plan, the mission and values of the organization? What is your vision? This is the glue that ties you together. Who are you and what is your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? And this, while it might shift slightly, won't shift drastically and is the glue that's going to continue to tie you together. Where does their role fit in? So ensuring that new hires see the interconnection with different teams and departments is going to be imperative. Reviewing that organizational chart and showing them exactly what that looks like. Are you able to get some pictures in there so that employees can refer back to this when they're not quite sure who someone is? Maybe with those pictures is a key tidbit about someone, how long they've been there, or a piece of personal information that can allow employees the opportunity to bond before they even meet. Depending on the size of your organization, you're also going to want to decide if having team or individual meetings that represent the larger team makes the most sense. And that really will depend on each unique organization. Communicating culture in a virtual environment is going to be so key. Do you have any type of cultural welcoming committee? Who are your most creative and positive employees at your organization? Who are the cheerleaders? Who champions culture well? Lean on your team. Who are the influencers or natural leaders who really can talk about the culture and how it's impacted them? Have you thought about putting together some type of cultural document? And if you haven't, these could be easily created, a quick 1 or 2 pager that gives a feel for your organization. It could include your values, how the organization supports your employees, includes testimonials or quotes from your staff that talks about the organization and how they're a part of it. Again, what are you doing to welcome those new hires and how that aligns culturally? Do you have some type of virtual lunch to welcome them? You could go online and order everyone lunch from Grubhub to have it delivered so that they could all eat together on a video. And while it's going to look a little different, there are ways to definitely bond over that as well. Having a results orientation with balance and flexibility is going to be key. If you already have an onboarding platform that you utilize in person, maybe it's packed within a few days of that first hire. What we're going to recommend is that you need to spread that out over the first few weeks or the first 30 days. Onboarding now is going to be a longer term experience. Zoom burnout or video conferencing burnout is real. So finding the right pace will be key and ensuring that those essential meetings are at the beginning of your onboarding process with those overviews and the key deliverables that are going to be needed and the cultural pieces so that employees know how they fit within the organization, and then spreading other things throughout the rest of those 30 days. And finally, you're going to want to look at key administrative and operational considerations. What do your new employees need to ensure that they're able to do their job? Computers, monitors, documents, access to different systems that you have. Getting them tools prior to their first day and having them shipped to wherever they are to ensure that they're ready to go when you begin. Is your operations team able to put together an overview document of how to set those things up remotely from home so that it's user-friendly? And then having your IT department follow up to ensure that people have the different programs they need that first day to really hit the ground running. Following up within the first few days and weeks to see if additional help is needed will be important. Some of your new hires will be really tech savvy and catch on quickly and not need a lot of additional support, but others won't. And so it'll be important that you tailor your approach, because those that might not be comfortable in a virtual environment now suddenly find themselves in one. You're going to want to ensure that your managers review the position, the outcomes, the initial goals, both short and long term. Providing guidance and laying this out so that your employees know what's expected, and then managing to outcomes, deadlines, and deliverables. It's going to be essential to build a lot of trust in a virtual environment, and you're going to need to, make sure that you're managing to those outcomes and deliverables versus what people are doing on a day in and day out basis. Don't forget the ever important new hire paperwork and benefits review. And while this might not be the most fun piece of recruitment and onboarding, it's definitely essential and important from a compliance perspective. Benefits can be confusing even to those who know and understand them. So don't assume that your employees understand the nuances of all your offerings. Making sure you go through it with them at their pace to fully understand what the offerings are and how to utilize them will be important. This is a great time as well to utilize your broker if they have specific questions around health concerns or questions about unique pieces to your plan that you might not know the best about. You also want to try to digitalize your new hire paperwork and getting that out to employees prior to them starting. Paper forms have really gone out the window, and there's a lot of ways, whether through different online sites or your payroll provider is going to be a great resource for that, where you can digitalize the different forms that you're going to need to be using with your new hire paperwork. Many of you might have been worried about how you're going to complete the Form I-9 and to be able to verify documents in person. The Department of Homeland Security realizes that the COVID-19 pandemic has created unique challenges to that, and they've now lifted the requirement to verify original forms of identification in person. You can now do this over fax, via email, or texting pictures on a phone, or a video review can work really well too. Once we've come through this experience, you'll need to verify these forms in person, and there'll be different additional guidance around how best to do that in a compliant manner once we have kind of come to the end of COVID-19. And the Department of Homeland Security has really great resources on their website of how to go about doing this and what it'll look like in a post-COVID-19 world. The other piece too is if you're onboarding a lot of people, utilizing technology for your new hire paperwork, whether getting a small human capital management system or HRIS, or utilizing your payroll platform in a different way could be helpful. I know we also had a couple of questions about how best to have employees sign forms. And you can use everything from a PDF reader to have them insert a signature to actually utilizing a program like Adobe DocuSign, which is what we use at Nonprofit HR to get digital signatures. Recently, I heard a story about how a manager met a new hire in a parking lot to verify documents and give them their resources. I'd really encourage you to be safe during this time, and mailing and going about doing onboarding in an online manner through digitalized documents is probably the best way to go about this. And then we're all new to this process, and seeking feedback is important in any new process. Asking your employees what they need to be successful will be key, and asking what worked in this virtual onboarding experience and what you could have done differently or better will be important to ask them too. I wouldn't just ask the new employees, I'd also ask those that are participating in the process, because your current employees are going to have really great ideas and be hearing stories about how others are doing it well or what isn't working. And we can all learn from each other during this process. Making changes and adjustments for your next orientation will also be key once you get that initial feedback. 30, 45, 90, 120-day check-ins to gather more formalized feedback, to check in as an HR department will be important as well. Setting the right cadence of when those check-ins should happen should be done by you. You know your organization's culture and what makes sense. And we wanted to point out that you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. The experience and how you treat your candidates and employees from the onset will set the tone for your relationships with them. Start from the beginning. Put your organization's best foot forward to ensure that employees have the resources they need and feel prioritized in a virtual and uncertain time. This will help them to make a more meaningful impact on your mission quickly and tie them to your organization for the longer term. As we end today, we wanted to remind you of a few key takeaways. Danisha?
Thanks, Heather. So yes, if you'll recall, you want to make sure you start out by aligning your recruiting process to a virtual environment, always ensuring that you're maintaining high candidate engagement and as well ensuring a positive virtual interview experience.
You also want to make sure that your onboarding takes a holistic approach, and it should include relational, strategic, cultural, and operational components. Take the time to ensure the right cadence and pacing for this. It shouldn't happen in days, but in weeks and over the course of several months. Leverage your entire team to help ingrain and teach your new hires about your culture. You want them to feel a part of your organization from the beginning. We'll now turn it back over to Alicia so that we can start some question and answers.
Great. Thank you, Danisha and Heather, for all the great information you shared this afternoon. We definitely have some time for questions and answers. So we do have a number of questions. We have one question related to what you were talking about, Heather, with the I-9 form. And if you're an organization that is not 100% remote, the question was, they believe the Department of Homeland Security only waived ID screening for those who are 100% remote. Is that correct?
We can double check that, but I believe that the requirement has been waived across the board. I think that first and foremost, it's about being safe and making sure that your employees are showing the identification, but doing so in a manner that ensures the safety of both your managers and your new employees.
Okay, great. And then in terms of having new hires come on board, what recommendations do you have for maybe check-ins or performance review timelines and such for like 3, 6, and 9 months out as part of this kind of bringing them on board effectively?
Sure. So looking at how you go about performance management very much ties back to the type of organization and the culture you may have. And you know the best cadence for that for your internal organization. There's many clients that we work with that have moved to more of a constant feedback structure, and they might have a more formalized check-in at the 30-day mark, but then again at a year because they're constantly having those conversations. I think that you can tie things up in a quarterly type of bow and look at it in that direction. But I think more often than not, it's having those regular check-ins initially and then having managers and employees checking in regularly to say, are you getting the feedback that you need? How can I support you better? What could we change about the rhythm of this? Or on a longer term basis, how can I make sure that you have the feedback that you need? And it's ensuring that the important conversations are happening. And I don't know if the schedule is important, is ensuring that the feedback and the relationship building is happening.
You're listening to The Switch. Follow along with this podcast. Download the slides and other visual materials at nonprofithr.com/The Switch.
And then somebody asked a question about background checks, because I believe background checks are taking a little bit longer these days. And then there are others that maybe they can't do during this period. Any suggestions for dealing with when you can't necessarily give somebody, you can bring them on board, but you can't give them full access to all your systems because of this?
Again, I think it would depend on the type of work that you're doing and what type of confidential information might be within your systems. A lot of our clients have confidentiality and non-disparagement agreements, or actually have clauses or policies about this within their employee handbooks. So I would point to looking at things in that manner. But I think in making contingent offers and then ensuring that you're doing background checks as appropriate and consistently across the board would be key as well.
Okay, and then another one for you, Heather. What are some things you've seen, some strategies for HR to support hiring managers in the onboarding process, and how can you encourage managers to play a larger role in that process?
Absolutely. I think that HR is really key at creating certain pieces of the scheduling and how the actual orientation is going to be done across the board, but in ensuring that managers have the right training and are able to answer the questions as it relates. Different managers will need different levels of training. And while there should be some type of initial support and training across the board, some will need more than others. So being there as a resource to brainstorm with them on how they can be most impactful and feel comfortable getting their employees what they need. But I think setting up the operational and administrative components either on your HR or operational team to remove that burden, but ensuring that managers have a set checklist of what are the key types of conversations and meetings that they should be having and what the right pace of that is will help them in putting those together.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I have a question for Danisha. Somebody is looking to start a phone screening process for candidates, and they wanted to know if it's better just to cold call them and ask them the questions then, or if they should set up a time to officially speak with them and ask them those questions.
That's a great question, Alicia. I think that the best way to do this in this environment is to definitely cold call. The reason is that, again, time is of the essence. And for those organizations that are hiring, you can imagine the mass amounts of candidates who are looking due to furloughs, layoffs, and all manner of other circumstances. So you want to be the first to make the good impression and to engage those candidates. And time is lost if your email lands in spam or anything like that. So go ahead and reach out to them. If you are able to connect with a candidate, be respectful of their time and say, hey, I understand that we didn't schedule this call, but now that I know that you have an interest, would you have 15 to 20 minutes now to do a phone screen, or can I go ahead and schedule that for you? That way you're being respectful, but also you're taking advantage of making that contact right then.
Okay, thank you. And another one for you, Danisha, related to using recorded video interview platforms such as SparkHire. I know, for instance, some of my clients have used that, and it's been kind of handy where you can have applicants record videos and you can give them all to a hiring manager and they can look at them when they have the time and then kind of narrow down the pool a little bit. Any thoughts on using such a platform?
That's a great question. And I myself have not personally used platforms like that on the hiring end, but I have been involved with platforms like that as a candidate myself in my job searching past. There's two things that I would say. One, it can be a wonderful way to leverage time and to have kind of a repository where you can go back and pipeline candidates for future positions. But I want to say also balance it with the level of the role. If this role is a high-level manager or above, consider that the candidate experience could actually be declined or suffer because candidates at that level want to be engaged on a more personalized and specialized basis. So if you can, think through how you can do the phone screen and then put that person into the remainder of your process with your video interview versus putting them into an automated recorded video platform for an initial experience with you.
Okay, and then I see a couple of questions related to group interviews. So I guess one looks like it's asking about how do you suggest, if you have multiple interviewers, how do you suggest is the most effective way to do that virtually? And then the second question related to that is if you want to interview for certain types of tasks, like to see how they do in a team, is it feasible to do an interview like a mock interview role play simulation where you have a group together? So a couple of questions on group interviewing.
I'll answer the first, and then I will need to revisit the for clarification on the second. But the first is how to effectively approach a group interview. A couple of things. One, you want to have what we at Nonprofit HR refer to as an interviewer's toolkit. In the toolkit are all of the questions that you are going to ask consistently to each candidate. During the planning phase, you'll want to organize those who will ask questions versus those who are there to observe and take notes. When you introduce each member of your panel, be sure to, if time allows, let everyone say a very brief 20-second intro of themselves, name and maybe how long they've been with the organization and welcome type of thing. And then let them state their role. I'll be here asking questions. I'll be here observing the interview, that kind of thing. That puts your candidate at ease, and it also organizes the flow. In your toolkit, you can also pre-assign which panelist is going to ask which question. And since everyone is working from the same information, that will allow for a very smooth transition from the first question on down to the last question. Now, hopefully that answers that person's question, but Alicia, can you give me that second question once more about the tasks?
Yes, so specifically it says, when video interviewing, what do you suggest for performance tasks that involve a group, like a mock interview role play type simulation? Would you suggest the format is like a panel interview?
Okay, I'm still struggling a bit to clarify. So if that person can further clarify, that would be helpful. But what I think it means is if there are a number of tasks that you are looking to clarify whether or not that candidate is able to perform the task, and those there are varied tasks that you're screening for, would it be best to do a panel interview? And the answer to that is yes. For instance, if you have one person in a role who is going to touch or interact or interface with a number of different teams, then it is helpful, rather than doing 3 different interviews with each team, to bring a stakeholder from each team to a panel environment. And that way you can collectively vet if this one candidate has the skills to address all of the various teams' needs.
Okay, and that sounds like that's where I interpreted the question as well. So thank you, Danisha. And a couple of questions about people's hesitancy with the virtual process. So how do you handle a candidate who refuses to basically show their face on your video interview? Should you respect their wishes, or should you push to have it be a face-to-face process in video?
That's a great question, Alicia. The key to this is planning and preparation. People are much less apt to push back if everything is laid out in the beginning. So for example, here at Nonprofit HR, when we're retained, part of the process when I reach out initially and source candidates, or when I respond to applicants, is to lay out for them the full interview and selection process from the very beginning. This allows candidates to self-select in, or raise concerns, or self-select out. For example, there are some clients whose process is very elongated. Again, with the executive search work that I do, candidates may be asked to do a phone screen with me, then go on to a phone interview with the client, then go on to a first, a second, and even a third video interview with all manner of stakeholders, whether it's board members, whether it's teammates, whether it's potential direct reports, and the rest of it. This can be very fatiguing to candidates, but if they are well prepared in the very beginning and start to acclimate to the idea of what they'll need to do, then this is a hurdle that you can overcome. If you are dealing with staff level or middle management level roles, there's no difference. Whoever is in charge of the phone screen should also prepare candidates for what they have to look forward to in bulleted fashion, so they really understand the process. They have a chance to ask questions about the process and raise concerns about the process. One of the things that we provide here when we're retained by our clients is ongoing coaching for candidates. So that could mean in the prep call, I'm actually running a mock video interview with a candidate who's never done it before, helping them with some of the same tips I shared here, like lighting and position of their device, and how they can make sure that their environment looks professional and things like that. This puts candidates at ease and gives them a much better opportunity to present their best face, if you will, in a video interview.
Okay, and then somewhat related, if an organization or a candidate is hesitant to make an offer if they haven't met, or if you want somebody to relocate, is it reasonable to expect them to relocate during this time of stay-at-home work?
Yeah, again, it's definitely, unprecedented times that we're in. And I think, again, here, the biggest issue is moving through this process with empathy and with a genuine focus around the human element. Your recruiting department and talent acquisition team must be extra sensitive to the dynamics that candidates are facing, checking in along the way with candidates as they continue to matriculate through the process will be critical. So in other words, at every phase of the process, you'll want to check for their engagement and desire to move forward. You'll want to check for concerns that they have about moving forward. You'll want to address those concerns by going back to your organization and getting the information that will help to put the candidate at ease or help to clarify their questions, and then come back to the candidate in a timely fashion and let them know how they can address those concerns. Again, some of the aspects of this are a little bit deeper than what we have time to really address here, but overall, you really want to approach every single candidate as if, they were your VIP candidate, because in this environment, every candidate is a VIP, quite frankly, because it is a very difficult scenario to navigate. But again, with over communicating, checking for understanding, checking for concerns along the way, you will be able to overcome some of this. Now, will some candidates fall out? Of course, yes. Some candidates will say it's just too volatile of an environment. The employer that I'm with now feels secure, and I would prefer to just stay where I am until I know what's going to happen in the future. But for some candidates who, again, have been laid off or there's uncertainty in their organization, they will be extremely open to moving forward with your organization if you've done this process correctly.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for listening in to The Switch. Does your organization need to talk with someone about the topics we covered today? Nonprofit HR is your thought partner for all talent management lifecycle needs. We've served the social sector exclusively for more than 20 years. Call us 202-785-2060 or email us for a mini consult. info@nonprofithr.com. Looking for more episodes of The Switch? Visit nonprofithr.com/The Switch and access recordings and resources to help your organization maximize its greatest asset, your